Hello, Tom Stapleton here from WCAT, and to my right is a man that we all know pretty well, and if you don't, you should. It's Chief Rick Smith, the Chief of Police of Wakefield. The gentleman has an awful lot to talk about today. He recently just went on a trip, and we're going to be discussing that because I think it's something that you'll all find interesting. But before we do that, Rick, how did you start out when did you decide to become in law enforcement?
Actually, Tom, I get into law enforcement by accident. My father and all of my uncles were firefighters, and I wanted nothing more than to go on the fire department. When I turned 19, there was a lot going on in the world, and I couldn't get a job in the fire department. So I had an opportunity to go to Martha's Vineyard and work as a summer police officer.
Oh,
that
sounds good.
It's a few years back, so the island was a little different then. So I worked a couple of summers out there, and when I graduated from college, there wasn't a lot of work around, so the chief at the time asked me to stay on.
In Martha's Vineyard?
No, Martha's Vineyard.
Oh, yeah, okay.
44 years later, I'm still here.
Here you are.
But I've been blessed. I've been really blessed. I started out there as a young summer cop at 19 years old, and I've worked my way through the ranks. I've been chief in 2 communities. I've done every job in this business. Not many people can say that. From foot patrol to motorcycle to bicycle to being a patrol commander to being a patrol supervisor to running the desk to detective commander. I've been very lucky. I've had a great run.
Yeah, it sounds like you've held out there too, and you look pretty good. So it's you survived. What I'd like to do is get into another subject that you're doing, and it's an organization, the International Associations of the Chief of Police. Quite an amazing job that is. And how did you get involved in that? How did we end up there?
Well, Tom, when I became chief back in 1998, I got very involved in both the regional, the Northeast Law Enforcement, Northeast Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council, NEMLEC, and I also got involved in the state association, which is the Mass Chiefs of Police Association. And over the years, as we became exposed to more and more, I ended up sitting on both executive boards. I still sit on both executive boards. And I find that I really enjoyed the opportunity to make a difference, to give back, set policy, work with our legislative contingent on trying to change things for the better, and bringing things back to the communities that I served. So over time, I was asked a few years back if I'd consider running for a national position with the International Association of Chiefs of Police. So I thought it over and checked it out with people that needed to know about it, and my bosses. And I decided to run for the position of Vice President at Large, which is a 3-year commitment. So I ran a nationwide campaign, flew all over the country. I won the election in Orlando 3 years ago. I'm sorry, I announced 3 years ago, and I won the election in Chicago. And then I was sworn in Chicago, and I have a little more than a year left on my term. And as a result of that, I sit on the board. I'm one of 13 board members from around the world who sit on the International Executive Board. And we do a lot of work. We do white papers. We do a lot of research. We do a lot of development. We try to share policy. We make statements on behalf of policing. And in the short time that I've been on the board, policing has changed dramatically from last year when record numbers of police officers were murdered at the hands of assassins to this year where we have a change in administrations and we have a whole different view of police by our communities. Who knows what next year will bring? Right. But it's been a great opportunity, and I'm grateful that this community allows me to do that. Most of this is on my time. Most of it's on a weekend. I just flew back from Seattle last week and spent 3 days out there at a board meeting. So it's been a great honor. There's a lot going on. But I think the trip you want to talk about is a trip that was the highlight so far, is that the president and the executive director of the ICP asked me to go to the United Kingdom.
That's why I'm heading that direction. Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to hear about it.
But so I was asked by them to represent American policing in the UK. And I flew over there right after the 4th of July. And I spent the better part of a week in the UK. And I had the great opportunity to talk to the 46 chief constables, which are their version of chiefs of police from around the UK, which includes, as we all know, Wales and Northern Ireland. So it's the entire island of England, as well as Wales and Northern Ireland. Policing's a little different over there, but the bottom line is that we're all doing the same mission. We're all going in the same direction. It's just how we get there is a little bit different. But I will tell you that my colleagues, being the only American in the room, my colleagues over there admire what we do in the United States as far as policing and how we interact with our communities and our people of color, our people of different religious backgrounds, and the youth, and how we deal with the youth.
I understand that they police a little bit differently than the U.S. as far as guns go. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, interesting conversation. We met for 3 days out in the country, in Chesham, which is outside of London. It's about 40 minutes outside of London. And we met at this old country estate. And this country estate has great historical significance in that the German U-boat crews that were taken prisoner during the Second World War were housed there. It's a beautiful old estate, and they were housed there before they were shipped off to the POW camps just before the end of the war. So there's a lot of history out there in this beautiful estate. Of course, it rained, typical of the UK, it rained. But we sat in this great room where I'm sure that probably many U-boat commanders sat around. So the historical significance was huge. But we got to talking about, and their question was, gun violence in the United States. As we know, guns are not, first of all, they're not legal in the UK, nor are they very popular in Western Europe. So their gun violence is way down. I'm not saying that they don't have violence, but the killings by firearms are almost unheard of. It's getting more and more prevalent now, but not like it has been. Their police officers, for the most part, don't carry firearms. It's just a whole different concept. The last police officer killed by a firearm in the UK, in the entire UK, was 3 years ago. They asked me when the last police officer killed by a firearm in the United States was, and I honestly could say last night when we had that conversation. So without guns, and they're very strict about it. They're very strict about possession of guns. If you're caught with a gun in the UK, you go to jail. You go to jail for a long time. So people understand that guns are taboo over there. So they asked me, do you think we'll ever get rid of guns in the United States? And I said, you know, Americans love their guns. But when I explained to the chief constables, and these are chiefs of places like Manchester, England, London, Liverpool, these are major, major cities, major industrial areas, explain to them that, you know, we may have, in the city of Chicago alone, on a weekend, you could have 40 some odd shootings and 10 or 12 people killed. They couldn't fathom that. They just couldn't understand that, the number of homicides that we deal with. And then we started to talk a little bit about body armor. And our body armor is, that we wear now is basically determined by the caliber of the weapon that we have to defend ourselves against. Their body armor is built a little different because they get a lot of knife attacks over there. So, but we talked about, one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit here is what we talked about there is the 6 tenets of the president's commission, if you will, the task force on community policing. And we want to talk a little bit about the openness of policing. So I walked them through the 6 pillars of the community policing, 21st century policing, as it's called, and exactly what those mean and how we get back into our community. But the biggest thing is transparency and police legitimacy. And they might call it a little something different over there, but basically it's the same thing. And what I was trying to explain to them is that before you're successful in your community, it doesn't matter how big you are, whether you're Chicago, or whether you're Miami, or LA, Wakefield, it doesn't matter. You need to have an opportunity to sit down and develop yourself as a legitimate law enforcement agency. Because if people don't believe that you legitimately have the power or authority, then you'll never get that power or authority. And the other piece is transparency.
Yeah.
And people, the community that you serve, have to really know what you're doing. They have to feel like they're part of policing. The irony of this whole thing is, here I was talking to the UK chiefs about transparency and community policing, when the whole start of community policing started in the 1890s with Sir Robert Peel in London. So it's come full circle. So it was a great time. It was a great opportunity for me to be there. It was a great opportunity to share some of the United States philosophy on policing and listen to what they're doing over there. And they're doing a lot of things. But see, Tom, one of the biggest problems they have over there is terrorism.
I was going to ask you about immigration and terrorism. How do they handle all that?
Well, in many ways, even though the UK or Great Britain is an island, it's an open community. It's an open nation. And Western Europe is open. I mean, people travel through tunnel, by train, by ferry. Like it's nothing. Although they do have very secure borders, there's a lot of people that go back and forth between these countries. They cross over the country lines like we cross over state lines. So with that comes a population that sometimes isn't good for your population. So they're a very open country in that they're very welcoming. They're very welcoming to people that look different. They're very welcoming to people that pray different. And so you have all these different elements. And unfortunately, terrorism preys off of that. Yeah. Now, their intelligence network over there is very, very good. And their communities are built to repel terrorism. They have the major roadways have stanchions along the roadways to prohibit cars from going off the roadway and piling into crowds, like we just saw down in Charlottesville, Virginia over the weekend. Right. So they're very proactive like that. They spend a lot of money in trying to defend against terrorism. Their intelligence network, like I said, is very good. And don't forget that they also share a huge intelligence network with the Western European countries. So like their Interpol or their version of their intelligence network is very dynamic, it's very fluid, and it's very open between all of the countries in Western Europe. So they deal with it in a different way than we do because we're basically across the pond, we're on the other side. Yeah. And our immigration issues, although the same, are a little bit different than theirs are. But they're very strong and they're very firm in their policies. And in Great Britain or the UK, if you violate the law, there are sanctions. And it's that simple. So it's an interesting concept, and it's a concept I think that we can learn from as well as they can learn from us. One of the interesting things that I found, I had a day and a half before I could fly back to the United States. I had some time to spend in London. So I went back into London and stayed in a hotel. And I had an opportunity to tour a little bit of London. And I couldn't believe, after going through some of the museums and seeing the resiliency of the Londoners and how, under the leadership of Winston Churchill in 39, 40, and 41, when World War II was really starting to ramp up, the resiliency of the Londoners. And based on that, from what I saw, terrorism is not going to get Great Britain down.
Yeah.
If they survived the onslaught of World War II and the nightly bombings and the death tolls, and they came right by, as soon as the bombers would fly away, the Londoners would come back out, they'd come out, they'd put the fires out, and it'd start to rebuild. And London's a city the size of New York. It's 10 million people, 32,000 police officers today in the city of London. It's a big place, but they're very resilient, and they're very strong people, very proper people. It was a great honor to be there. It was tremendous.
Yeah, it certainly sounds it, and I'm kind of envious that I couldn't be there myself too. Did you visit any other museums or anything that might have been of some interest to you?
I did. I had the opportunity, and everybody told me to do this, that I had to go to the Churchill War Rooms. Now, and the reason I was interested in that is my father was a flyer in World War II. And he was stationed in England up until D-Day, when the whole mission changed to the continent. So he flew missions on D-Day, and then flew into France and did a tour over there. So I had a great interest in what happened in World War II. So I went into the Churchill War Rooms, and I spent 4 hours in there. And it was just phenomenal to see how Great Britain defended against the onslaught of Nazi Germany, especially in the early days of the war, the early years of the war, until the war turned. And it covered, the Churchill War Room covered a lot of areas of the war. It not only covered the intelligence side of it, but it also covered, the aerial bombardment, the maritime side of it, the foot soldiers. It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. And like I said, I spent 4 hours in there. But I did get to see Buckingham Palace. I did get to see Parliament, London Bridge, all on foot. All on foot. Bring sneakers if you ever go, because it's a lot of walking around. But it's a great city with. I'm a history guy, so it's a phenomenal amount of history that goes back to tells you a lot about the resiliency of the British people.
Well, it certainly sounds great, and at some point, I hope within, well, hopefully sometime I'll be able to get out there and take a look at it, because it has a lot of history there.
It's a quicker flight to London from Boston to Heathrow than it is from Boston to Seattle.
Oh, really?
I found that out within 2 weeks. But one thing I want to talk about, Tom, is let's bring it back local.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've been blessed, and people put their faith in me and their trust in me to represent the United States in different places, some places in this country and other places, around the world, around the globe. Before I came here, I just got off the phone with the chief of Knoxville, Tennessee, about some problems they had down there. But one of the things that I value is that I can always bring back lessons learned from where I go and from the conversations we have. And to bring those lessons learned back here and share them with our command staff, and then hopefully tailor them to the American way of policing. Wakefield has earned a spot on the map as being very progressive. And I tip my hat to our staff, and I tip my hat to the people that embrace these ideas and make them work. And they need a nip and a tuck here to make it work, but nonetheless, we're going in the right direction. So people always ask me, Chief, what is this? How is this good for Wakefield? And I think it's very good for Wakefield. It really gives me an opportunity to share some of my insight that I learned from others right here on the local level. And I think, judging by what you see in the community of Wakefield right now, I think most people might agree with me that it certainly has some value of being exposed to this and not getting hunkered down into a small town mentality, because crime knows no zip code. And as we see around the country in small towns and small cities and places like that, we have to defend the homeland at that level. And I think that's I've learned that, and I've been able to share that. Look what we do on the 4th of July. Right. Most people have no idea what goes on behind the scenes. I do. Right. And if I were to share that with you, I wouldn't for security reasons, but if I were, people would be amazed at the work that the Wakefield Police Department puts into making sure that's a safe day, and the fire department, and DPW for that matter. but it's under the leadership of our command staff. And that's all stuff that we've brought back that I've been able to bring back and share with our commanders. So it's all good, as they say.
Well, it certainly is, and I know we've got a few minutes left here, but I personally, I think that you've done a wonderful job since you've been here. And I think that's the feeling of a lot of people in town. And if something seriously happens, I think they feel as though that it's going to be taken care of in the best way it possibly can, depending on what it is. But I really believe that we've been very fortunate to have somebody like yourself on board here, and the trips that you take are definitely educational for you, and you can't help but bring back a lot of different things. And you're right, staying local would not help, because there's so much going around outside of us that you really need to be aware of.
Well, you know, one of the things, Tom, I know that we're running short on time, but one of the big issues right now is the opioid crisis. You know, we're no different than the town one town over. We're suffering, you know, overdoses. Our personnel are seeing this every day. Our personnel are going to these calls and seeing people that are, you know, addicted to this horrible, you know, phenomena that's going on right now. We're saving lives. There's no question we're saving lives. But again, crime knows no borders, and we deal with that every day. And to be able to bring some of the stuff back from other agencies and what other communities are doing, and share that with our government leaders here, who, by the way, have been very, very supportive. You know, the government leaders in the town of Wakefield have been phenomenal. Mr. Mayor has been great in supporting this, but he also knows that, you know, we're making a difference every day, and you know, it's fun. It's fun, and you know, we have some great people that work over there, and they work hard every day, and I couldn't be more proud of them.
You're right. I've been in town a while now, and quite a while, and I'm impressed with the way things are being going. I mean,
Thank you.
we are going to have problems here and there and differences and so on like that. That's just part of the game. But overall, I think that you know, everyone's doing a pretty darn good job. And thank you very much for the help that yourself and your force and your great people are doing.
No, you're welcome. It's been fun. It's by the way, I have 44 years as a police officer.
Yeah.
I'm not done yet.
I didn't think so. No, you got a little time left to go.
we have a lot of work to get done, and we have a lot of work to do. And,
All right, great.
You know, we'll get it done. Whatever the next day, whatever the next challenge is, we'll figure it out. And you know, for the community to put their faith in us to figure this stuff out, and I think that's what good government is about.
Yeah.
The people that we serve have to have the faith that we'll be able to figure out the issues as they pop up, maybe prevent them, hopefully prevent them. But if we can't, being able to fix them,
Right.
and if we fail, being able to make the survivors comfortable. Think about the victims, make them comfortable, and make it right for them. So
Right.
that's good government in my eyes. And you know, we get up every morning, put our shoes on, and come to work and do what we
Go
have
to
to
town.
do.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you very much. It's been really enlightening, and I'm so glad that we had a chance to get together and go over some of the stuff that I think is very important.
Well, thank you,
Appreciate it.
Tom, and you know, maybe we can do it again.
Absolutely.
All righty.
Take care. Thanks, Chief.
Thanks so much.